back. We again deliver a very simple message. America will never be a socialist country.
Joining us right now is the former CEO of CKE Restaurants, former Labor Secretary nominee, and the author of The Capitalist Comeback, Andy Puzder. Andy, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here, Maria. Thank you.
I love the title of the book, The Capitalist Comeback. Is that what we're seeing? Because it feels like it's the socialism comeback with all of this talk on the left of socialism programs.
Well, you know, it's so wonderful to see the president and Republicans on the offensive for a change on this economic issue. The president really defending capitalism, free markets, economic freedom, personal liberty, the things that made this country great, and doing so at a time when economically the country really is coming back from the big government policies under President Obama and the more free market policies under President Trump. So you do hear a lot about the socialists, you hear a lot about democratic socialists, but even, you know, Kamala Harris the other day was saying she's not a democratic socialist. Elizabeth Warren's out there making these huge and hard to afford proposals, but also says she's a capitalist. So I think Democrats are seeing the danger of being identified with this far left wing of their party.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. In fact, that op-ed a couple of weeks ago in the Journal said it all. Who's afraid of socialism? Because isn't this true, Richard? I mean, a lot of the candidates now are trying to detach themselves from the idea of being a socialist, and yet all these programs, Medicare for all, you know, child care for all, the Green Deal, these are all federal programs that are socialist.
Well, I mean, I don't want to call the program socialist. I think the question we have to ask ourselves
is Medicare for all is a socialist program.
I think the devil will be in the details
and
how it comes out. But I think the question that Democrats are asking themselves is how do we deal with the extreme income inequality that exists in the United States of America? And I don't know if. Well, I mean, I think the question for you, Mr. Puzder, is how do we deal with, as from a capitalist perspective, how do we deal with the wealth inequality, which has continued to rise for the past 3 or 4 decades?
Well, you know, I'm glad you asked that question. First of all, I want to point out the Green New Deal is clearly a socialist program. It involves the government taking not only health care, but the transportation sector, the energy sector, maybe the construction sector. We're talking to implement the Green New Deal. You really would need a government that we don't have in the United States. You'd need a much more powerful government. You'd need to limit personal liberty and economic freedom. So there's a big difference. Now, how do we deal with income inequality? We're dealing with it today. The only way you can reduce income inequality is by raising the incomes of people at the bottom of the economic spectrum. And what you're seeing today is a blue-collar economic boom. It's hard, for the first time in decades, it's harder to find blue-collar workers than it is to find white-collar workers. You're seeing wages for blue-collar workers go up faster than wages for managers. You're seeing more people employed than have ever been employed and more job openings than we've ever had. So you are starting to see, I think the numbers are going to come out and show that income inequality is in fact coming down because of capitalist free market policies, because what happened under President Obama was that the situation was exacerbated for years, where income inequality actually increased. So I think you're seeing that reverse now, which is really positive for American workers.
What do you think about that, Richard?
I mean, I just tend to disagree. I mean, I think if you look at the statistics from the feds a couple months ago, where you have 7 million Americans behind 90 days behind in their car payments, you have millennials who can't buy homes. Those speak to the fact that this booming economy is working for some, but it's not working for everybody.
Well, you know, look, millennials can't buy homes because of these government programs that buried them in student debt. I mean, for the first time in decades, you are seeing America's working class incomes rise. America's working class is going up. American blue-collar workers are better off today than they were just 2 years ago.
But not at the same level or rate as hedge fund managers, CEOs of companies, real estate titans, and I think that's why the income inequality distance will continue.
So you think everybody should be the same?
No, I'm not saying everybody should be the same.
You just said hedge fund managers.
I think if you were to ask me what I think good policy is, I think good policy is making investments, right? You can't say that we want to see income inequality decrease and you're not funding public education, you're not investing in students so they can come out and be CEOs and be coders. The problem we're having is there's no investment happening on the front end, and we're expecting results on the back end.
Well, but the problem with, but Andy, the problem with the Democrats, like a proposal like Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax, is her idea is we're just going to, okay, you're a great American success story. If you're Howard Schultz, who's probably a political threat, you grew up in a housing project in Canarsie, you created one of the great American brands of the last century, and we're just going to take your money and we're going to spend it how we see fit. That's no solution to income inequality.
It is not. What you really need to go back to is what President Kennedy said. President Kennedy said a rising economic tide lifts all boats. And what he was talking about was this idea that the left has, that progressives and socialists have, that wealth is a zero-sum game. In other words, the wealthy only get wealthier if the poor get poorer, and the poor only get wealthier if the rich get poorer. That's just not true. Economic growth, capitalist free market policies can lift everybody, and they, in fact, are lifting everybody today. Richard, look at the numbers. Look at the number of people working. Look what's happening with wages. Look who's benefiting. Working class Americans are being lifted up. Now, you may be upset that people that do well are doing better as well, but that's no reason to be upset. Everybody can do better.
But I'm looking at the numbers, and 7 million Americans are 90 days behind in their car payment, which is a leading indicator that the economy is moving in the wrong direction for working families and middle-class families.
And you've got 7.3 million job openings and 6.3 million people unemployed. Look, that's
the reason for that is because those workers don't have the skill. There's a skills gap, right? So there's jobs, but the workers aren't prepared to do those jobs. That if you talk to Google, if you talk to Amazon, they will say that's the problem. We're not investing in any of these programs to train these workers to do these jobs. So these jobs are going overseas because of that.
But that's not the job of the government, Andy, right? That's the job of the employer. Let the private industry train these people. It's up to the business owners to do it, not Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
And that's not what I'm saying, David.
No, but you said you want more investment, and I agree. We need an education policy that arms our young people to thrive in this new economy where you've got AI and China, but it's not it shouldn't be another federal program.
No, I'm not saying it should be another federal program. I think you have to ask yourself the question, why is it that all across this country, educators are going on strike? And the reason is because a lot of these educators are putting their own money back into their classrooms. They're buying winter coats. I met an educator in New Orleans who bought a belt for a student.
Right, but that's why school choice is so popular and why Ron DeSantis in Florida did so well with African-American women voters in Florida. Despite having an African-American Democrat candidate, he did well because you're right, public school systems are failing, and that's why people need
But even charter schools are going out on strike because the funding isn't there. In Chicago, there's a charter school that's currently on strike because there's not investment
of anything anywhere.
No.
But you know, the wonder of all this is, the great thing is that 2.5 years ago, the biggest problem in our economy was too many unemployed people and not enough good quality jobs. Because of President Trump's capitalist free market policies, the biggest problem now is too many good quality jobs and not enough employees to fill them.
Right.
That's the capitalist comeback. It's a complete turnaround. So we are reducing income inequality. You just got to give it a little time. It's only been 2 years.
Last report was 3%, 3.1% gain in wages. That's true. Andy, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Good to be here, Maria. Thank you.
Andy Puzder joining us there. Coming up, all eyes on Walmart after the retail giant's strong fourth quarter earnings report. Stu Varney